Hello and welcome to BQ Prime. You're watching a special interaction with Tarun Bajaj, former Revenue Secretary, and we're trying to discuss the social stock exchange framework, how it has been put in place, and how he thinks that it will evolve over a period of time. Mr. Bajaj, thank you very much for joining us. The regulator has put the framework. The exchanges have started the work on that, but we haven't seen a pickup on that innovative idea, which could transform the way money can be put to good use and effectively in a transparent manner across various social schemes.
So, Sajit, as you would know that the regulations by the SEBI have come out, and this was a budget announcement of 2019-20 by the finance minister, and it has also been proposed that the existing stock exchanges will facilitate the listing of instruments to be listed by such non-profit organizations or for-profit impact organizations. So my understanding is that both BSC and NSE are working on it, and very soon we should see a framework ready by the stock exchanges which would enable the NPOs and the for-profit impact companies to be able to list their instruments. Yes, it is the first time that it will happen in the country. So some work, I'm sure, would need to be done. There are other requirements that need to be done by these units before they come for listing. So maybe the initial start may take some time, but it is a very interesting and innovative idea, and perhaps one of the first countries that is trying to do a social stock exchange in its framework.
How do you think that it will change the way donations are going to be made? And for organizations who are seeking those donations, what kind of changes they will have to bring in?
So first thing is, right now, if you look at the organizations that work on impact, we can basically describe them as, for example, there are foundations set up by the bigger companies themselves who put in their own money there and try and do some impact investment or creating impact on certain areas. Then there are some others who try and collect money from people they know, or we also have these foreign contributions that come to them. But on a larger piece, it's to bring the donees and donors together, there is no place. For example, you may like to invest, say, you're passionate about environment. You may like to invest in environment impact, but you are not aware of the organizations that are working on it. And then you would also like to be sure that the organization that you are actually giving money or donating money is the right organization, that it is actually doing the work that it's supposed to do. So this will create a platform, and this platform would enable these kind of objectives to be fulfilled. So on the one hand, the donor can actually choose from various people to where to donate, and the donee is not somebody, it's like a black box. He will have to abide by certain regulations in terms of transparency will be brought in terms of what he has to disclose on an annual basis. And then he would actually also be evaluated on the impact assessment score. There'll be social audits, and ICI is working on it. And so it'll have a different discourse, and perhaps will encourage people who can't have their own foundations to come and donate to such organizations, so that we need a lot of money. Government alone cannot provide all the money. So this will be an additional source. And I think once it picks up, it will take time for the first one to come in or the first few to come in. But once they come in, we'll see that there'll be larger number of units or impact investment entities that would like to come into this forum.
Sir, in India, when you look at donations as a whole, if you're doing through private sector, if you're doing to a private sector, you get around 50% exemption. If you're doing to government or central government, state government, it's around 100% exemption, which is done through ATG. How do you see this regime changing? Because if you're going to bring in transparency with respect to the way you're going to do donations, the way you're going to invest or use that donations for social impact and get a desired results, do you think that there needs to be a change in the IT Act or some of the sections of to incorporate social stock exchange as one of the ways to get donations and recognize donations?
So I think there'll be a number of instruments that would come up in this process. One would be, say, for zero interest and zero principal, which means that I put in money, I get no interest, I get no financial returns, but I get only social returns. So perhaps there may be a case in such kind of instruments to provide for some tax exemption like it is provided to certain institutions. And I'm sure if such institutions are already covered and have that certification by the income tax authorities, perhaps these instruments or this method also would be added. Till I was there, I don't recall that there was any reference from anywhere, but I don't think this is a big task. It can be done. But there may also be instruments, or they may come up in the future where there are small financial returns and along with social returns. So one will have to see and examine these cases. But on a broader point which you are raising, I think if we provide tax benefits to organizations that are working in this process when they collect money through people they know, I think there is also an equally strong reason that if money is going through a stock exchange, which is a much more transparent method, a similar dispensation can be provided. And I think once the process starts, we'll also see some action happening on that end.
So, do you see coexistence of both the routes, or do you see, you know, moving to a organized, transparent route like a stock exchange to to claim those benefits which many people do when they when they invest or donate to a Section 12A or 12B, 12AA or 12AA companies?
So I think there will be place for both the organizations to exist. One is through the social stock exchange, and the other is the usual one, which is in existence even now, where people go and collect money. Or I know a particular charity that is working on cancer patients or something, so I keep. The issue is that if somebody wants to come to a social stock exchange, he has to be of certain size. Now, there are small NGOs that are working in smaller Mufassil towns or smaller places or don't have the wherewithal to do that. So those people will not be able to come to a social stock exchange. So I think they will continue to be there. But yes, over a period of time, when the awareness goes up and these limits go down, there may be a case of more money flowing to the social stock exchange than money flowing directly. But I think the direct ones will also continue to exist for times to come.
Do you think that currently any organization which has a spending of more than 50 lakhs a year or funding of more than 10 lakhs every year should come directly through a social stock exchange?
I think the issue is that if you come through a social stock exchange and say you want to raise, say, 1 crore of rupees, so you will have to do some disclosures, you have to do some registration. Then once you go to the social stock exchange, maybe you need a merchant banker or somebody like that. So there is money to be spent. So while I think 100 crore corpus has been created to assist and handhold such units, but I think in my own view, there would be units of much larger size that would like to come here, or a mutual fund or an impact assessment fund that would collect money from people and give it to these NGOs. So only such organizations that actually are planning a little higher investment and a higher collection would be the ones that would be approaching the social stock exchange to start with.
And when you speak about the smaller organizations which are there in tier 2 or tier 3 cities, which are doing a lot of social or NGO work, which is there, do you see it makes sense for them to come under an impact fund, under the umbrella of an impact fund, and then come and seek seek funds from the social stock exchange, because that way you're bringing in more transparency in the way how it is going to be distributed to all these funds, as well as the impact assessment, or which I think the SEBI has laid down a clear guideline of how the financials have to be put, how impact assessment has to be made on a yearly basis. That brings in much more better way of bringing social change or social impact for smaller companies.
I think the smaller companies will have a challenge in terms of their capacity, in terms of their reach, in terms of their expenditure that they can make to go to such exchanges. So to start with, I will reiterate that it may not be possible, though from a macro point of view, that it brings in transparency, that it brings in better efficiency in the system of working of these non-profit organizations is very valid, but I think there has to be a minimum size beyond which such organizations need to come to social stock exchange. And if actually this succeeds, in 5 to 10 years, if we find that entities are able to come to a social stock exchange and raise money, we'll find the larger ones coming there, and maybe then those larger ones can actually put in money in the smaller ones which are working in the Mufassal towns, and insist on certain transparent regime in them also, as much as they are subjected to that transparent regime. So I think the environment and the ecosystem will develop as we move on, but these are very early days and very difficult to speculate or to predict as to how this movement will go forward.
There was when this committee was made by SEBI, the committee had put in a recommendation that private sector should means individuals or entities investing to private sector social agencies, they should be given the same kind of treatment as public sector if they are coming to the social stock exchange route, because currently the 50% exemption is there for private. If you're donating to a private sector one, the 50% exemption comes in. If you're donating to a public one, it's 100%, which is given, like the Prime Minister's Relief Fund or any other fund which is being managed by the government. If they come through social stock exchange, they should get the same treatment as the public sector. Do you think the government would be able to provide that kind of incentive?
Let me clarify one thing, that not all government funds which have been created like this get a 100% exemption. As you mentioned, the PM CARES or the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund would be getting 100% income tax relief. But I think there is a Ganga fund which I think still gets 50%. There are many other funds. For example, there is a fund in the MHA which gives some money to the Jawans families who die during action. That also gets 50%. So it is, so basic idea is that when I donate something, I should not be donating only for the sake of income tax. It can be a nudge for me, but not something that I look for everything from the government. Because if I'm in a 30 or a 40% bracket, and if 50% is coming as tax exemption, which means a certain portion of money has actually been paid by the government, which otherwise would have come to the government as taxes. So the government has given up its taxes. So I think a 50% is a fair representation, and I think this demand of 100%, I don't know what the government will take a view on that, but my personal view is that a 50% is good enough, especially when I've seen in the last 2 years that I spent in revenue, we did not approve even a single public sector fund with 100% exemption. So we were reluctant to that. We were only doing it at 50%. So I think 50% is a good number.
Sir, I was looking at the paper, the working group's paper, and they had mentioned that in FY20, the revenue loss for the government from ATG was around 2,500 crores odd. So the amount is very small, but if it gets structured, the impact could be multifold of 2,500 crores, because then the whole issue of what we see in the market about fake donations or fake donation bills which is going around. And as in revenue you will be, we have seen it much more than I have. Those issues can be tackled much better in that sense.
So I don't know whether you're saying that if the government gives 100% or I am not aware of this figure of 2,500. I think it should be. You have picked it up from the budget paper, so
I picked it from the budget paper and the working group paper.
Okay, so 2,500 crores is not much, and I would say they are doing a much work in this area. So sacrifice of 2,500 crores in the overall tax revenue is not a big thing and we can actually do more. But I think the government would love this 2,500 to go 5,000 with more people donating money rather than increasing the thing from 50% to 100%. That is my view. So, and I think when I donate money, I should actually have my heart in the impact that I'm trying to make and just not the tax incentive that I'll get for it.
And so, going the social stock exchange route could be a much better one if you want to, even if the government loses another 2,500 crores through social stock exchange, it brings in transparency and much more better impact assessment for all the donees who are doing it, or donors.
So I would completely agree with you that in the social stock exchange, because there is greater transparency, there is more efficiency, we are bringing in better instruments or more instruments, getting more people to donate money. So even if the government has to sacrifice some bit of it, it is not a big deal.
Sir, as you see it, and you have seen a lot of institutions being built. How do you see this social stock exchange experiment taking off? What could be the milestones for the social stock exchange, and where can the impetus come from the government side?
So I think the first impact that will be seen is as the first NPO or an impact for-profit impact company actually listing some of its debt or equity on the exchange and raising money through this process. Once it raises money, it will really create a buzz, and a lot of people who actually donate money will start looking at these avenues, and I'm sure then the money that will come through this process would only go up, and it will also encourage the NPOs who are right now operating in this environment to actually come to this platform, and then they will perforce look at transparency and other measures which are important for such kind of entities. So I think it will be a win-win for donors, donees, and for the people for whom this impact is being attempted to be made.
So finally, sir, we've seen a couple of instruments being talked about. We also seen some institutions have already started some kind of funds, like HDFC has a cancer fund which does donation through that. Do you see more institutions coming in and putting their money for the impact, social impact through the social stock exchange fund? And do you also foresee corporates also using the same route to do it?
I think so, because not all corporates would have their own foundations. So some of the corporates could actually be setting up Section 25 companies and trying to do through this process. And also, I would see that once people see the benefit, and if people, there is a middle class, there's an upper middle class that wants to share this money but doesn't have any avenues to share this. So once they have these avenues and they know that there is this credible group which is behind this whole system, and if they give the money, they will put it in for the right purposes, and then they publish their impact, they publish their accounts which are audited, the social audit is taking place, some kind of social score is also coming in. Once all that happens, and then media like you would start evaluating all of them, so it'll bring in transparency and news and noise about all this. I'm sure this will be a very encouraging thing and a new avenue for actually helping out a large number of people who need help, not only from the government, but from all these kind of agencies.
Mr. Bajaj, it was a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you very much for joining us on BQ Prime.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.